Um, Thanks everybody else for joining. I'm sure we'll have some more folks filter in here. Really appreciate being here today and looking forward to going through some of the interesting things around Synapse. Obviously this is a product that's evolving dramatically, seemingly every day, right? I think the latest announcement I saw last week, or even possibly earlier this week, was that the Spark clusters now support Spark 3.1, right? And so the beauty of the cloud is that we're ever evolving. The tough part is keeping up with it. So I commend and applaud y'all for joining today. Do not be shy, please. Feel free to ask any questions. Go deeper on something, things like that. It's actually part of my job to talk about Synapse, right? And so I really enjoy the technology. I really enjoy the opportunities that it affords for our customers to be able to leverage such a great product and really complete their overall analytics picture. So for those folks that don't know me, my name is Seferlis. I'm a data and AI specialist here at Microsoft. I've been here about 2.5 years, just under 2.5 years, and loving it. Right, it's a great place to be, and we're always hiring. So feel free to go take a look at the job site and get yourself over here. I was in the Army back in the beginning of the Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, back in 03 and 04. Spent a lot of time in IT, been in IT for over 20 years. My last IT role was a CIO. Spent a little bit of time at Pragmatic Works and came over here to Microsoft as well. My core focus is around data warehousing, BI, and what kind of business value can be driven from that. Really want to look at what the optimal solution is from a cost standpoint, but also from what your requirements are, right? Basically, as I finish up the presentation here, I'll be running off to coach my girls in soccer. So if I cut it short, you'll know why. Couple things to note, right? This is an evolving space. We are constantly learning new things, taking new approaches, looking at the ways that we've developed things in the past, what we can learn from it, and what we can use with the technology platforms of the future, right? The beauty of the cloud is that scalability and just that ability to do so much with so little of the back end work, right? Folks who grew up in IT, like I did, and like I say I did, we have that sort of that age old. Well, I have to set up the background system, and I got to configure drivers, and I got to configure the rest of the system, and make sure that the services play nice in the sandbox. Well, a lot of that is largely going away, and there's a lot of different approaches at doing this, right? And so when you're evaluating products, there are some very, very strong offerings out there in the space of data warehousing. And then there are some really strong offerings out there in the space of data science and machine learning. And so you have to do what's best for your particular organization. All of the products that are out there have strengths and weaknesses. But I think what Synapse provides over any of the competitors is the complete picture. And so when we think about that, we have to think beyond data science and data warehousing at the core fundamentals of those practices. And we need to be able to kind of look outside the box at the whole picture of our data story, right? And I think analytics is a huge part of every organization. And so this discussion is designed to help folks understand what Synapse has to offer. And when we look at the common data workloads that are out there, we look at machine learning, data science, and data warehousing, and BI, and data analytics, and advanced analytics, and streaming data workloads, and all of these areas. The idea is to kind of give a general overview of what there is to offer from a Synapse standpoint. And really, this is driven by the challenge of our data constantly changing, right? The three V's of volume, velocity, variety, and one of my fellow presenters even threw the fourth one there of veracity of data, because sometimes data can have teeth. But it genuinely has, there are some significant challenges for those of us who work in the data space, right? And the idea is to be able to address those problems in such a way that we can implement solutions in a very, very short amount of time. And then those solutions give us the ability to derive value from the data that we're putting into it. And this helps us to understand what happened historically in our businesses so we can learn from those challenges and opportunities of the past. It gives us the ability to understand what's happening right now at this point in time, what's happening on our manufacturing floor, what's happening in our sales cycles, what's happening in our supply chain, and all these different things that we have to worry about. What's happening on social media, right? Is anybody tweeting at BizDataViz and saying how great this presentation is? I could have a tweet deck up and watching that, right? And then really, what do we expect to happen in the future? Besides you all telling me what a great presentation this was, you want to know what's going to happen in your business, right? And you want to know what's going to happen, not only from a projection standpoint, but you want to know if there's going to be delays in that supply chain. You want to know if there's going to be a dip in sales because of supply chain problems, right? And you want to be able to predict some of that, right? And so the tools that we're giving to help with that will be covered today as well. Because the reality is, every dimension of this data is constantly expanding, right? There's a stat that's out there that, there's going to be 175 zettabytes of data on the planet by 2025. I think IDC predicted that last year, right? For perspective, that's, what is it? A bunch of Blu-ray discs stacked from the moon and back, right? And it's just, insane to think about the data growth that we're seeing these days. And, some of the challenges that go with it. Because really, those challenges are around things like data silos, right? Our data exists in the silos. There's all kinds of data coming in. It's stored across databases that power the applications of the company, right? And data from our sensors and devices are coming in all the time. We've got external data sources like media and those types of things, right? And harnessing all that is really challenging and really costly. We've got performance constraints when we have some of these systems that are on-prem that are aging, or we have to have a long cycle to grab new hardware to refresh it, right? And so the cloud affords the ability to be as flexible and nimble as possible. And then really, the complexity of the solutions, it's more than just I have to build my data warehouse, right? It goes far beyond that these days, where we have to think about, okay, yeah, what are we going to do with our historical data? Are we going to store it in the data warehouse? Does that really help us with our data warehouse, enterprise reporting, BI information? Or does that get stored, in maybe a data lake where we're consuming it when we need it to run our advanced analytics or predictive analytics and those kinds of things? And then finally, costs are crazy, right? We've got cost issues sort of across the board, especially when we're talking about on-premises. When we need to go and buy new hardware, we have to over-provision that hardware for what we need, not only today, but in the future. And we have to make some kind of a guess at that. So with things like Synapse, we have the capability to scale out and scale up as we need in order to accommodate any of the additional challenges or any of the additional opportunities that we may have as a business. Because in case anybody was wondering, these challenges aren't going away, right? We have significant business needs where we've got a bunch of streams on a bunch of different technologies that we're working on, right? And there's almost this tug of war between the business and IT and leadership and sales and you name the department about what's more important, right? What's more important to the organization? What's going to help us move forward? And then when you add in all the complexities of all the data sets that we've talked about, right? How do you make those decisions, right? How do you decide what gets priority, what gets trained on, right? What systems get purchased? And these are the challenges that IT leaders and our data leaders and business leaders are really challenged with every day. And so we're going to look at a couple of architectures and the things that we're seeing out there that probably resonate, and maybe you haven't thought about in some of the areas as well. So at a very high level, when we look at our common data architecture today, we have all of these components, right? There are a lot of complexities to build out these solutions, right? We've got a vast array of data sources. We've kind of talked about that. We have to find a place to land all of that data. We've got our operational data needs. We have our analytical data needs, right? Plus, we have to make sure that we can trust that data, right? And that our people can trust that data and that they have the data they need, right? Every standalone component of this architecture has 6 enterprise needs which go along with them, right? In the architecture we're showing here, including the cloud services, that could mean 36 different points of failure, inefficiency, or cost. And every additional cloud platform also incurs its own burdens that go along with it, right? So when we look at this slide from left to right, we look at what are our enterprise requirements? What are those areas that we have to make sure that we're secure, that we have governed data, that's compliant with any regulatory bodies and bodies of that nature? Is it available, right? Are we running in a hot HA environment, and can we trust that if that environment goes down, we've got a backup to be able to make sure we still have that information available to us, right? Can it perform and scale the way we need it to? What are our skill sets internally? What do we have for training purposes? What have we ramped up on over the years? What is our licensing costs that are associated with keeping that old system and not upgrading to the new one? What are our maintenance costs? And how much of it's actually being used, right? I mean, are we paying for 10,000 seats of Tableau, but we're only using 500, right? And so there's an analysis there. And then how are we keeping an eye on all this to make sure all the data is flowing properly, that we know where the data is going from end to end, and that the right people are accessing that should be, and the people that shouldn't be are not. When we look at a modern data warehouse architecture, right? Customers are using it all the time to maximize the value of their data and help assist them in becoming a data-driven culture. The modern data warehouse lets you bring together all of your data at any scale very easily using Synapse and Data Factory and Databricks and Power BI, right? It helps you get the insight and the information that you need through analytical dashboards or operational reports or advanced analytics for all of you, right? When we look at our advanced analytics story, we're using a lot of the same components, except now maybe we're using some auxiliary components to train our machine learning models. Are we using Spark clusters that we've built ourselves? Are we putting Spark on AKS? Are we using Databricks? Are we using a data science VM that either one of the Microsoft data science VMs or one that you've built with your own favorite flavor of tools, to build those models and train those models and retrain those models, right? And then when we start looking at real time, right, what tools are we using here? How are we ingesting that data? Whether it be event hubs or IoT hub for our devices, or Databricks for our streaming, or Kafka, or using a managed Kafka solution. You see a lot of overlap in a lot of the requirements that go into building out these solutions for the various workload types. And so when designing Synapse as a big picture item, we kept these things in mind. We wanted to be able to satisfy the data science requirements, things like your coin term, big data, data experimentation, or quick exploration, and maybe data that's not structured all the way, right? Semi-structured data, or converting that unstructured data to semi-structured or structured data. And we found that the data lake was a great use for that, right? And then on the flip side, we had our business analytics. We had our data warehouse, the legacy structure that we are comfortable with. We had the tabular data. We started using columnar compression to make it run faster and more efficiently, right? We had that all-in-one flavor of security that was all tied to the data warehouse infrastructure, and so that we were buttoned up and we knew that people weren't accessing what they shouldn't, right? We had that dependable performance because we knew that our report's going to run at 6 a.m. and we had those servers over provisioned to make sure that the report was the CEO's email at 6:30 a.m. and he was ready to go, right? And it's largely that structured data set that we're so commonly used to. But in order to really understand the requirements, we took another step back and we said, what are the capabilities of a data-driven enterprise? And we came up with these 7 tenets to help shape what the rest of the offering would be as a result, right? We have to have that single point of accountability for data that allows for simplification of the management aspects of it, as well as the connectivity and the deployments, okay? We have to be able to quickly provision trusted data and analytical assets that support our business strategy, right? It's all about supporting the business. We're not just adopting technology for technology's sake. We're supporting the business. We need to have that centralized data governance, cataloging, glossary, and lineage information to help our users find what they need much more quickly and to help our developers share their insights about that data more easily in a streamlined way so that it wasn't disruptive to their process. We needed to establish an organization's data and analytics marketplace so that we have the data that we can share to our customers, our partners, and then they can share back to us in a nice streamlined fashion, okay? We need to integrate AI into all of the business processes to maximize business value. You'll hear this term a lot, maximize business value. We need to have the analytical assets that we are going to deploy using things like data ops, ML ops, and DevOps. We need to integrate analytics into operational business processes for on-demand insights. We need to deploy real-time analytics to monitor business operations. This is huge when it comes to things like manufacturing floor. What are those real-time operations? We need to understand what our customers are saying about us on social media. We need to be plugged in and we need to be able to respond to these things very, very quickly. We also need to be able to get to our line of business data very, very quickly from our transactional systems in a simplified and controlled way without impacting those systems and causing bottlenecks, right? Raise your hand if you set up an SSRS box that tapped directly from the OLTP systems, and when that report ran, it slowed down the ERP, right? Very, very common. It happens all the time, and the ERP vendor doesn't care that you're writing reports and slowing down the system because all they care about is the system. They don't care about your reports, right? And so, we have those types of situations. They still happen today. And we want to be able to make sure that this is all integrated into a collaborative environment where our developers, our engineers, our data scientists, and our business analysts can work in one common platform that helps them to reduce the need for learning a whole variety of different systems. And this is a big one, right? We adopt a new system, everybody needs to be trained on it. Well, how seriously do those users take that training, right? In my experience, not very seriously. They breeze through it, they do the bare minimum, and they say, I'll figure out when I need it, right? Well, if we're using a common system across the board where, you get the training up front, they'll maybe half pay attention to it, but they can much more easily tap their neighbor and say, hey, I'm trying to run this report. Do you know how to do it? Odds are they're going to pick up different aspects of that training and know how to do it. So with all that in mind, Synapse becomes this opportunity to tie all of those areas together. At the foundation is the governance and compliance of the most secure data warehousing and analytics solution on the market today. End to end, Synapse has more security than any of the competition out there, and it's all tied in with Azure Active Directory, and it's all tied in end to end with all of the systems that are used. Beyond that, you've got the governance that you need, you've got the availability and recovery that you need, you've got the performance and scale that you need, you've got the skills and training all tied into that same product so that you're not hunting around to try to find a new thing. You're also removing that need for licensing and usage in large part because now it's all consumption based, right? And finally, all the monitoring and oversight of those systems are all tied into the same interface. This really gives the ability to then push all of our data up into one cohesive workspace that allows everybody to be working in the same system, no matter what their workload type is. If it's a machine learning workload, if it's a big data workload, if it's a data warehouse, if it's data exploration, or if it's business intelligence. And then that allows us to build our data domains based on the core fundamentals of the business and only using the compute that we need to serve those domains when they need to be served. And this is all tied in to the entire suite of offerings from Microsoft, right? So Synapse Analytics has direct tie-ins with Power BI and machine learning and Dynamics and Azure IoT Central and Dynamics 365 Field Service and all of our fringe products, HoloLens and all of these very cool products that we also have to offer. And it all uses the data lake storage and common data model as its foundation that our partners can very easily interact with to be able to share this data in a common way and make sure that we've got all of these workloads are covered. With our Synapse Link product, it gives us the ability to now fully embrace HTAP, or Hybrid Transactional Analytical Processing. This is something that's been around for quite a while. The term itself was coined back in 2014 by Gartner. And the reality is, in order to implement these solutions previously, it was very, very expensive, right? And it was very, very challenging to maintain both of those transactional and analytical data sets in order to make sure that they were tied in together, right? And you had the same data in both places without these long ETL cycles. And so being able to tap into these data sources with Synapse Link, in this case, I talk about Cosmos DB as well as Dataverse. We're also coming out in preview with SQL on-prem and Azure SQL. So you'll now have the ability to leverage the HTAP capability with Synapse Link so that your transactional systems stay the same, unaffected by any of the workloads that are requiring further analytics from that data as you pull it over with Synapse and do the processing in the Synapse engine so you do not affect those transactional systems. You don't slow anything down. Plus, you don't have to build the integration pipelines. You don't have to build a whole new ETL because you're tapping directly into those transactional sources. Simply put, from a Cosmos standpoint, we're taking that transactional store and we're flipping it on its side and basically mirroring all the data that's going to the transactional store into the analytical store. And then we're able to tap out into that using Synapse. So it's very, very cool technology. We've seen it expand to Dataverse, and then we're going to see it expand to SQL here very, very soon. Are there any questions? I don't see any in the chat so far. Anybody have any questions thus far?
No, I don't see anything, Chris. I think, march ahead.
That's okay. I really just did it so I could take a sip of water.
All right. No worries.
So, okay, great. So moving on. Streaming ingestion, right? We have to talk about IoT. because IoT is taking place in all kinds of businesses in all kinds of ways these days, right? And so whether we're using event hubs for other streaming workloads, or we're using IoT Hub for that sort of two-way communication with our devices, we need to be able to quickly ingest that data and do something with it, right? Our Stream Analytics product is able to very, very quickly translate any of that data that's coming in into whether it be a streaming dashboard or further processing downstream with a SQL pool, or even just putting it into an archive in blob storage for later consumption or running larger analytical workloads on that data. We've got the direct tie-ins to be able to handle those workloads as they pass through the system onto whether it be intelligence about the systems or alerts about what's happening inside of our system, right? We want to make sure we have all of that covered. And then we talk about our hybrid data integration. So when we talk about our Azure Data Factory product, which has been around now for almost 4 years, which is pretty crazy to think about when it came out in preview in the end of 2017. It is a cloud native data orchestration and aggregation transformation tool. There's nothing of its kind out there in a pure cloud form that's, everything's cloud born about it, right? The development environment is cloud born. All of the management aspects are all cloud born, right? And so it gives you the flexibility to be able to do the development anywhere that you are using that cloud platform, assuming you have the internet, right? And then having the power to take our SSIS packages and very, very quickly drop them into that into the ADF runtime, so that now you're removing the requirement for compute on your premises, and now you can bring that up into Azure, and maybe have to update a couple of sources and destinations. Otherwise, the third-party tools are highly supported, that work in SSIS, in the environment. And, a very, very high percentage of these can be just lifted and shifted, so that it minimizes the time it takes to move these workloads into Azure. Okay. And plus, there are new connectors being developed all the time to be able to support, other clouds or SaaS environments or new on-premises uses. There's all kinds of stuff that are being developed in order to support needs of all different kinds for customers, as well as being able to have the DevOps style development aspects of it, so that you can have the native tie-ins with the GitHubs and the Azure DevOps tools to be able to update these jobs on the fly or programmatically, to be able to take on new workloads or change schedules and schema changes and all kinds of things like that, right? So a lot of flexibility and capability here. So, you look at Azure Data Factory, you look at Azure Synapse, they're one and the same largely, and we'll see that going forward, because there are uses where you might use Synapse and you might not use Data Factory, right? And so, we want to make sure, we're accounting for both types of operations. And then speaking of DevOps, right, we have this sort of end-to-end solution that we make available to our customers that are tied into our GitHub environments, our Azure DevOps environments, right? We've got the direct integration for end-to-end application lifecycle management for the entire team of developers to really work together, regardless of their location or time zone, right? And using DevOps Kit, customers have the ability to add extensive automation into their solution deployment to really kind of eliminate those human errors that we run into. And it really helps us to accelerate the delivery of the features that we want to put out there. And the nice thing is that, we've got SQL queries, we've got notebooks, we've got pipelines, and they're all supported by Azure DevOps for that direct integration. One of the newer products is Azure Synapse Pathway. If you haven't seen this is really cool, right? It's basically taking 90% plus of the code from the leading appliances. You see that we've got Teradata up there and Netezza up there. A lot of those products are going end of life. Maybe you want to get off your Exadata, or maybe you want to move away from Amazon Redshift, or hey, Snowflake got really expensive really fast. Maybe we should think about something else. Same thing with Google BigQuery, right? We have a lot of that code taken care of that's helping to reduce the time it takes to move into Synapse, take advantage of all the features that we're talking about, and minimize the painful migration process of the legacy systems, and helping dramatically simplify and accelerate those migrations. And then we talk about AI, right? We talk about machine learning. We want to democratize data science to all. So we have everything from the low code, no code environment using things like Azure Machine Learning, Auto ML, all the way to what I mentioned before, building notebook files, or using scikit-learn and some of the other award-winning but highly sought after tools in the data science and machine learning space, that we widely adopt all of the open source tools, all the open source frameworks, to give you the ability and give data scientists the ability to build their models and their analytics on their terms, and not have to learn a whole new set of tools, because they're very, very comfortable with what's available already. And we talked a little bit about the open nature of this. We're supporting all of the most popular and common languages, as well as data formats, right? And so these are things that are commonly looked at as ways to help folks stay in what they're used to using, right? And then use the most common frameworks, as well as data formats that are being widely adopted, right? Parquet runs great on distributed systems, so you can analyze great off of Azure Data Lake Storage, but also using Azure Synapse as that compute engine. And you'll see that these grow over time. We've got roadmaps for other unsupported file types, and it just will continue to grow. And then we talk about auto machine learning, right? If you're curious about data science, if you're curious about what machine learning is, you can throw a set of data at the machine learning engine, the Auto ML engine, and it's going to spit out a predictive model that's going to use, it's going to show you a set of models that you can pick from, and it's going to make a recommendation based on what is happening in your data and what the best aligned predictive model is that goes along with that. And so, if you haven't had a chance to check out Auto ML, it's a standalone tool that you can load your data into and build machine learning models pretty much on the fly. But then it also has native integration with Synapse as well. And that's really just allows for more widely adopted machine learning and data science activities, to further the agenda of artificial intelligence. And the nice thing is that, again, adhering to the open standards, we want to be able to make sure that you can gradually change to these new tools, or even just keep your old tools. So if you're very comfortable with the way that Tableau works, or Qlik, or MicroStrategy, in these types of front end tools, then you've got that flexibility to tap into the data and get what you need from them. And then we talk about data governance. Anybody who had a chance to take a look at yesterday, we had a big announcement around the general availability of Purview. Purview is that all-in-one solution where you get the ability to understand what's happening in your data, build a data dictionary, build a glossary, understand the lineage, from the origination of data all the way through the consumption of data, right? And it helps us to make sure that we are compliant, right? And answers the questions on the right-hand side of the screen around what is our exposure to risk, right? Are we in compliant? How do I control the access and the use of the data? And really, what's required by the regulations that we have to adhere to? And Purview can help with all of those things, right? It's going to help us manage that growing data landscape. It's going to help us with some of the operational silos that we have challenges with inside our businesses. And we all know that we have those challenges. It's going to help us increase our data agility, right? It's going to help us be able to tap into those data sources that we need. And it's also going to help us comply with those regulations that we have in front of us, right? And so very exciting. Having the ability to tap into both our cloud-born as well as our on-premises environments for all of the information around that data so that we have a complete picture of what's happening end to end. And it's all tied nicely into the Synapse environment, right? So Synapse has native integration with Purview. It's part of the interface, right? So you can tap right into the Purview piece. And then the nice thing about Synapse is you can set up role-based access controls so that only your data engineers can see what they need to see. You can set it up so that you can have folks that are managing clusters and need to be able to scale up or down for the compute. They can only get access to that. You can have Power BI report writers only have access to that area once you have the refined and governed data models that they can consume off of. And so it gives us that flexibility to control all areas of the tool. But Purview is just another piece that can fit right into it and give us that governance and lineage that we need as part of the bigger picture. So really, when we look at Synapse and the capabilities that it affords us, is that ability to have the limitless scale to work with the data that we are being handed, right? What is the data that we need to work with on a day-to-day basis, and how does that stretch our limits, right? It gives us the ability to tap into powerful insights and having that unified experience to be able to reduce the overhead of training new folks on products and having to pivot from one to the next. It also gives us the instant clarity of what's happening in our environment with truly unmatched security. And the best part is that it's not stopping here, right? This is really just the beginning. Folks that have been watching this space, they've noticed a plethora of new services and capabilities added to the service over the past 20-ish months since it was announced originally. And by no means are they planning to stop with the announcements anytime soon. And that's really just to make sure that we're providing the best customer experience for all of the data needs that are out there. As more options become available and are tied into the Synapse ecosystem, we think about the Apache Spark clusters that were recently added, the Azure ML services, and Azure Data Explorer, which was just announced as part of the tool to be able to take on even more types of workloads. That's just to name a few examples. And we'll see more integrations and compute engines over time. Plus, when we look at the announcements around Azure Arc, right, and what Azure Arc can do in the way of multi-cloud and hybrid and on-premises type environment management and use cases, let's see where Synapse plays into that in the future. Plus, we've got the ability for the intelligent auto-tuning services that are just getting better and better all the time about how to do your intelligent query tuning, how to make sure that any kind of alerts or concerns are being raised up as quickly as possible. And these features are just being improved all the time. And then AI, we're just at the beginning of this, right? There's so much being added all the time that it just gives us a ton of capabilities. And what's really exciting is the upcoming ability to have more control over compute clusters, how they auto scale, how they control costs and those types of things. We'll see a lot of enhancements around that here in the future as well. I'm going to open the floor to any questions. I leave a little time for questions. Any folks have anything they'd like to throw out there? Can talk about, any of the topics we discussed here. Any other questions around this space? Feel free to throw them out there and let's discuss.
Thank you, Chris. I'm not seeing any question, but folks, if you have any questions, comments, Chris is from Microsoft, so you don't get a chance to talk to them all the time. You have to open a case to talk to them, and then you have to go through support to get to Chris. But
Well,
now you have Chris here. I know this firsthand. Sometimes I put a name in the case, like, can I talk to the? No, he's not in support. I'm sorry, you cannot.
Well,
And
and as you know, Teo, I'm largely available on social.
I
too.
know, Chris. I'm
So,
just
yeah,
I'm just trying to
yeah,
encourage folks to just ask you
yeah,
question, comments. So
absolutely.
we don't get this opportunity every day that we can just talk to Chris with anything
Yeah,
we want. I mean, of course, related to this. So yeah, we have pretty good amount of time. So feel free
yeah.
to put in the chat. We have our next speaker will be at 5:40. So 5:30 we are supposed to take a break. So there is a question. So Chris, I'll let you read that. So.
Yeah. So the question in the chat: are there any standard best practices for PaaS anymore? With the BI stack 2005 to 2019, it was easy. Now is everything. It depends. Well, it depends. Yeah. No. Good question, Dina. The idea here is to provide a platform that can accommodate any of your needs, right? So we have the Azure platform as a whole. And in the Azure platform, you can obviously go and you can get Snowflake. You can go and you can get Databricks. You can go and you can get Synapse, right? And there are a bunch of others, right? And SaaS is out there. There are a bunch of different tools that you can use through the marketplace. And the idea is that Synapse is becoming a platform of its own where you can take advantage of the tools that are available as Microsoft born services that allow you to, well, I won't say Microsoft born, but Microsoft services now. A fair amount of these are either from open source or from, potentially acquisitions over the years, things like that. But the idea is with Synapse to give that PaaS offering in one singular interface. Um, that being said, a lot of times it's a question around what is best for your business, right? Um, there are certain optimizations that Databricks has or in their flavor of Spark that are superior to what we have in the Microsoft Spark, right? Sorry, the Spark clusters, Apache Spark clusters in Synapse. Synapse and Databricks play very nicely together. They work well together. Maybe you use Databricks for your data wrangling aspects of things, and your developers are comfortable with Spark and writing in Scala or Python or whatever, and that makes sense. And then you use the Synapse SQL engine for the data processing aspects, because it can handle those petabyte scale data processing workloads to spit out to Power BI, right? So the development is all of those environments are tied into one. So the goal is to give the flexibility of what the customer needs. Now, if you want to stay in one service using PaaS, Synapse is going to give you the entire breadth of those products. Now, are they going to run as optimally as some of those one-offs? It really depends, and it really depends on the type of data you're using, the type of workload you're using, and so that's up to an individual company's decision on what they need, right? Do you need all of these offerings? Are you using all of this space? So does it make sense to have it all contained in there? Or is your workload so isolated that Snowflake is the best answer for you? so that Snowflake sits in the Azure platform. So you're still able to, use any data related activities with that Snowflake cluster alongside any of the other Azure data platform components. And then, that's all that you need, right? That's why you get that answer. It depends. Because, it really comes down to what does your business need? Looks like I inspired a couple of people. My company does not want to depend on only one cloud provider. I like Synapse, but that reason still has not been approved. Is there any integration in the future that I may move to my Synapse Workspaces project, move from one cloud to another provider, or make them work somehow? I can't say with any guarantee, but I would say most likely not, right? You can keep it open source by using notebooks. And there are SQL products in other clouds, but when you start getting down the line of using things like pipelines and data orchestration, with some of the data factory components, and you start getting more and more cloudified, then you're going to have more challenges. I'd say your best bet for something like that is to stick to something like the Spark clusters, where you can still largely use the code that you write for those Spark clusters and use them in any Spark environment, whether it's sitting in a container or on Databricks or another cloud vendor's version of Spark, whatever else is out there. How do you address the concern of vendor lock with Synapse versus Spark, Databricks, and other similar technologies? Kind of just talked about this some. I think a lot of it has to do with the level of skill set that your team has. Are they Spark developers that they know that environment really well? And so if you're moving it from one cloud to another, you're avoiding that vendor lock largely, right? I mean, it's not perfect. You're going to have a little bit of it, because there are certain code nuances that go along with it. When you're tapping into Azure Blob Storage, it's going to be a lot different than when you're tapping into an S3 bucket, right? But I think that if that's the concern, it has to be deliberate in the way that they're developed. And so instead of using pipelines for your data, transformation, you're probably going to have to use that Spark code to do that data transformation. Data lake storage is going to be data lake storage, going to be relatively consistent across the board. So you sort of have that lake house effect. There are challenges to that because with that, I guess, modularity or, modality, if you will, where you want to be able to have that stuff locked down and, governed really, really well and all that. It's going to be really hard to avoid vendor lock regardless, because, a lot of those tools are built native for those systems. And so it's sort of it's weighing out the pros and cons of that issue and that concern of vendor lock. I hope that answered everybody's questions. Feel free to throw any follow-ups in there.
This is the beauty of these conversations, right? If you just talk from your slides, you really cannot, you can never feel like, what the attendees, they really want to get to, right? This is good that you save some time at the end.
Yeah, well, I try to prod, right? I try to leave some time available to see if anybody wants to, throw anything out there, discussion worthy and stuff.
Yeah, so folks, we still have 10 minutes. You can talk to Chris, then we'll take a short break. So please keep putting your question, comments in the chat. I'm just going to go mute. There's another one, so I'll let Chris pick it up.
Sure. Yes. Dina, I hear this one a lot, actually. So data science used to be we'll do that after DW is all built. It sounds like with AutoML and other past tools, I should be pushing ML with DW, and never made sense to ignore it until the DW is done. Good question. It's definitely one that I see with a lot of our enterprise customers. And the challenge is that the IT teams want to govern and make sure that the data isn't isn't being run wild on, right? To lack a better term, right? They don't want to give up total control because they want to make sure that it's not something that can cause leakages or harm to the business. And I think that there's a happy medium there, right? I can remember working with one customer here in the Boston area, and we essentially designed their data lake so that they were able to use the hierarchical structure of Data Lake Gen 2 to be able to build in role-based access control and access control lists so that the PII data or PHI data was sitting in a completely separate area than the non-PII PHI data, and that could be used with any example, right? You've got security versus non-secure and those types of things. And that way, for advanced analytics, data science, machine learning, where largely PII has to be stripped out anyway, in large use cases, because oftentimes, and I won't say absolutely, but oftentimes that data really doesn't help, right? And so one of the strategies there was to remove that PII, PHI data, so that the data science and machine learning workloads could be built without impacting the security elements of things. The other question comes down to the cleanliness and the quality of the data. But I think a true MLOps process helps to take care of the data quality issues and the data cleansing issues, right? It's part of the natural process for data science. And so, I think that there's a happy medium there where you remove any data that could be sensitive, or mask it, and give the data scientists the ability to run what they need to off of that de-identified or masked data. Any other questions?